Welcome to Denver Gazette Sports Podcast. I am your host, Chris Schmedeke. It is Monday morning in the Mile High City, so we are reacting to the Broncos' huge win over the Atlanta Falcons, 38-6 over at Empower Field on Sunday afternoon. So we are back to the three-man booth again. I am joined by Chris Thomason. Chris, how are you?
Doing great. Just waiting for the Broncos to unveil their NFC South championship trophy.
Yeah, just domination over the NFC South. And then we're again joined by Kyle Fredrickson. He is back. He is a married man. He also had a very successful hunting trip. So, Kyle, do you feel different? Is it just a different day for you?
Yeah, I'm a grown up now. You get married and all of a sudden the clouds lift. No, it's been a great couple weeks. I appreciate the Gazette for kind of letting me poke my head in and out from the beat between my hunting trip and getting married, but I'm back in it. And boy, I chose a pretty good time as this Broncos team really put on a show on Sunday.
So, Broncos are now 6-5. They are in the seventh seed in the playoffs. The Bengals losing last night kind of helped them a little bit there as well. But we got to talk about Bo Nix, Chris. And he has his best day as a pro. He throws for over 300 yards. He throws for 4 TDs. He just continues to get better week by week.
Yeah, he was totally dominant Sunday against the Falcons, who don't have a very good defense, but they were absolutely atrocious against the Broncos on Sunday. Yeah, I mean, all kinds of superlatives that Bo Nix put up. I was joking with Tyler, the Broncos PR guy, who every week puts out something called the Extra Mile with all these statistical things, that are, Broncos positive. And I said after this Bo Nix game, he might have to go from a regular sheet of paper to legal sized, because that's how many superlatives he had. I mean, he had one of the greatest games by a rookie quarterback ever in NFL history. I mean, you mentioned 300 yards, 4 touchdowns, passer rating of 145, completion percentage of over 80%. And interestingly, also ties the franchise record of 14 touchdown passes in a season by Marlon Bristow in 1968, the first NFL black starting quarterback. I mean, I know that's not a super high number for a rookie, 14 passes, but it's kind of interesting that record had stayed on the books since 1968.
So Kyle, let's talk offensive rookie of the year, because it was kind of this foregone conclusion that it was going to be Jaden Daniels. Now the Commanders have struggled, lost two in a row. Daniels is clearly hurt. Bo Nix is playing kind of the best football of the year. Is he? I don't know if he's the favorite, but he's got to be right there.
Yeah, well, this was our Friday face-off topic from just a week ago with me and Vinny, our Nuggets writer, and I actually took the no stance and saying that this was Jaden Daniels' award to lose. But as you mentioned, maybe he is sort of losing it right now, and it's one part Daniels not kind of continuing his instant production and how well he got that Commanders team, I think, to 7-2 pretty in a pretty quick way. And now you got Bo Nix just surging. And, CT mentioned it. Maybe the Falcons defense wasn't all that on Sunday. They missed, I think, 8 players on their injury report going into the game. And then they lost a couple more defenders during that game as well. So maybe it's with a grain of salt, but the thing that is so impressive to me and why Nick should be in that conversation for offensive rookie of the year after that last game, it was the complete performance, right? It was the second half scoring. It was not taking your foot off the gas pedal. It was Nick's finding a variety of targets downfield. We sort of went into this season thinking that Cortland Sutton was really only the guy you have to prepare for on this Broncos offense in terms of pass catchers. But the way that Devon Vele is playing, Troy Franklin, Marvin Mims is getting involved in new ways. Everything around Knicks is clicking as well. And when you look in that Falcons game, it was just, they really put their foot on their neck at the end in a way that we haven't seen a Broncos team do in such a long time. So, there's going to be quality opponents to finish the year. And if they get to the postseason, and the Broncos, outside of this Falcons game, have struggled against some of those better teams. So there are question marks here that I think still exist. But boy, that was a positive sign for Knicks and this very young team.
We can have Marvin Mims minute in a bit here because he was outstanding yesterday. But Chris, I wanted to ask you, after the way the Broncos lost to the Chiefs, how important was it for them to respond in this way on Sunday?
Yeah, it was a very important and credit to the Broncos the way they've responded the last 2 weeks. I mean, they got utterly thrashed at Baltimore, and then they come back and give Kansas City a great game, a game that they should have won. So you think, okay, maybe are their heads going to be hanging a little bit? No, not at all. I mean, they come out and have their best game of the season. And, I think plenty of credit goes to Sean Payton, the way he's changed the culture of this team now in his second season. And it really is. I mean, you hear every single cliche. NFL's a week to week league. We just got to go 1-0. And really, I mean, the teams that are effective, that's what they do. I mean, look at Chicago. They lose on that devastating Hail Mary, and it's completely wrecked their season. I mean, they obviously don't have the culture and the coaching that the Broncos have. And I think it all kind of starts from Sean Payton down. And it was very impressive how they've bounced back, the last 2 weeks, even though they didn't win at Kansas City.
Then the Bears lost like the Broncos did yesterday on a blocked field goal to the Packers. So they discontinue their downfall there. Kyle, I want one more thing on Nix. A couple of those throws yesterday, that one down the seam to Vele, that on the run floater to Cortland Sutton. These are just throws that, I mean, to be honest, Bronco fans have not seen in a long time from a quarterback.
Yeah, it kind of looked like Nix at Oregon, right? And I think I
Yeah.
made that comment during the game is this was just like an Oregon offense, right? They were running with tempo, going out of the spread, getting really creative. Marvin Mims, who I wrote about after the game, and I know we're going to talk about him later, but just one note on him, that long third down completion that he had, I think for 30 plus yards, that's with him coming out of the backfield, a receiver playing running back, still running routes, really just that, creativity that you would see in an Oregon offense. So I think that comfort is there for Bo, especially when he's not evading defenders all night, right? I think in that game, when you have a clean pocket, it shows what this offense can be. And I'm going to be honest, that's probably the weakest pass rush he's going to see all season from the Falcons. I mean, if you look back at that tape, Nix is so comfortable that entire game. And it showed. It showed with the statistics, the way they dominated from start to finish. And just everything about this game, it should give Peyton confidence moving forward because it's going to be the Broncos' game plan moving forward. Against most teams. My question is can they keep Nix comfortable and upright against some of those better opponents?
Well, Kyle, since you wrote about Mims in today's Denver Gazette, I'm going to ask you about him. Like, they're trying to use him. So, like, they're trying to work him into the game plan. Peyton's talked about it. I think, is this just the player he is? He's going to have those explosive. I mean, he's not going to catch 8 balls in a game. I just don't think that's really his style. But this is a guy that they can use as really just a speed weapon more than, I mean, and he had a great punt return as well.
Yeah,
Yes.
100%. For whatever reason, he just doesn't fit the mold as like the lineup every down slot receiver type player that maybe Broncos fans envisioned, and I think even the staff probably envisioned when they drafted him. But you got to build your offense around the talent of your players, right? And I think that's something Sean Payton deserves a lot of credit for. Is they know that they have Marvin Mims' speed and his playmaking. He's a Pro Bowl returner. So you got to put him in position where he can show off those skills. Maybe if he's still not a traditional receiver. And what they did on his touchdown catch, and same with Troy Franklin, is that wide receiver screen, right? I mean, that's kind of like a kick return or a punt return in some sense. You get that quick ball out to Mims. You get a bunch of linemen running out in front of him, blocking downfield. And it's a very natural, I think, progression for Mims to make after he makes that catch to use his quickness and speed. So it's similar to Troy Franklin, what they did with him, but Mims specifically, you mentioned it, the punt returning earlier before. It seems like he's just the do-it-all playmaker for this team, and the more chances that they give him the ball, it just seems like he's been making plays And I also thought it was interesting. Sean Payton called him Mimsy after the game. That felt like
Hockey.
that was
Yeah.
like a hockey thing, right? I mean, in the NHL, everyone's got a nickname. Doesn't seem to happen in the NFL, but for whatever reason, Marvin Mims is Mimsy. So maybe we call this the Mimsy minute.
So, Chris, Kyle mentioned all the wide receiver screens. They had a nice screen to Javonte Williams as well. I guess, first of all, are they just riding the hot hand at running back, Chris?
Yeah, pretty much. If you told me before the game that the leading rusher was going to have 9 carries for 59 yards, I'd say, oh, it's a pretty good game by Audric Estime. But basically, they still have great respect for Javonte Williams. They don't just want to completely throw him to the side and just throw in Audric Estime. I mean, they know what the perception is. They know that if Estime had lined up as the opening back, it would have been okay. He's the starter, and
Yeah.
Javonte Williams is done. So they throw Javonte Williams out there, and I'm sure the plan was, hey, if he gets off to a hot start, we'll keep him in. If not, we got Estime in the bullpen, and then also McLaughlin. But Javonte Williams was fantastic at the start of the game. I mean, he was just it looked like the Javonte Williams of 2021. He was breaking tackles all over the place. I mean, that 14-yard touchdown run in the second quarter was incredible. I mean, he bowled over with help of pushing from the Broncos offensive line, and they bowled over half the Falcons defense. He also caught some passes. So yeah, I mean, that's the way, I think it's going to be. I mean, if Williams comes out in his next game and has another one of those 6 carries for 18 yards type starts, then they'll go to Estime as long as he's not fumbling. And Estime, of course, did get some work late in the game during garbage time and looked decent.
So, Chris, did Sean Payton see something that they could exploit this bad Falcons defense with the screen game? Because the screen game worked yesterday.
Yeah, I think Kyle, said it well that this was an injured and battered defense. They also came in number 24 in the NFL in total defense, number 20 in scoring defense, and had some guys out. And Sean Payton knows these NFC South teams. I mean, we touched upon it at the start. He's 4-0 this season against the NFC South, total domination. I mean, he coached the Saints for 15 years in the division. So, if you told me beforehand, I mean, I didn't think the Broncos were going to score 38, but I thought, maybe they could score 30 and it was going to be a shootout, maybe kind of like that Washington Denver game last season. I think the even more stunning was just how ineffective Atlanta's offense was, how bad Kirk Cousins was. I mean, they came in number 5 in the NFL in total offense, and the Broncos held them without a touchdown first time this season, totally shut down Cousins and running back Bijan Robinson.
So, Kyle, I want to flip over to the defense because the Falcons offense came in as a pretty legit offense, probably the most besides Baltimore. And I don't know what to think of Casey's offense, but one of the more legit offenses this Denver defense has faced. And in the early going, Cousins was moving the ball down the field, but the Broncos held. They didn't let them in the end zone. They made him kick field goals. And then Cousins is a statue back there, and they were able to start getting to him.
Yeah. It was to your point, I did go into that game and after the first series think okay, the Broncos defense might be in a little trouble, right?
Yeah.
Brandon Jones, starting safety, he's inactive before the game. He was limited in practice with an abdomen issue. I think there was some, prevailing sense that he'd probably play, but then when he didn't, I think it's Devin Key back there. And, I think historically, he's been a player who hasn't met the standard of some of these other defensive backs that the Broncos had. But it seems like everyone kind of settled down after that first series. I think it was important the Broncos held the Falcons to a field goal after they marched down the field with a pretty strong drive to open the game. And that's really, to me, where this Broncos defense has turned the corner in a big way. It's that red zone production has really been phenomenal this year. And in no game are you going to see it be more impressive than against a Falcons team that CT mentioned, entered as one of the best in the league. And For what it's worth, this is not a good matchup for Kirk Cousins because you mentioned calling him a statue. This is a guy who does not give up on trying to find some guy downfield
No.
as opposed to using his legs and creating plays that way. And I think, the way the Broncos are able to get coverage sacks, their secondary playing really well. Riley Moss continuing to show that he's a starting caliber corner in this league opposite of Pat Surtain. And then the pass rush just feasts, right? It's a multi-sack game for Nick Bonito. I think he's tied for second in the NFL right now with 9 of those sacks. So much to like from Vance Joseph's group in a game where it would have been very easy to make an excuse or say, hey, you played a great Falcons team, you didn't have Brandon Jones, so sure, you gave up a few touchdowns. But no, there were no excuses, and it seems like the defense is taking pride and being the true strength of this team, if we're honest. Because if Bo Nix can perform like he did on Sunday, that's sort of just a bonus, right? As he continues to grow. But this is a Broncos team that's led by defense.
I want to ask Chris about Nick Bonito because you had the story this week about how, they paid Jonathan Cooper. They're probably going to have to pay Nick Bonito. I think with that performance yesterday, Chris, he probably added a few $1 million to that contract.
Yes, yes, I saw wheelbarrows of money are definitely coming his way. That's what Jonathan Cooper told me last week, that he's just going to kill it and get a huge contract. So, yeah, that'll be interesting to see how the Broncos progress with that. I mean, they just gave a 4-year, $60 million extension to Jonathan Cooper, but that was kind of a different situation. I mean, Cooper was solid last year, 8.5 sacks, and they could kind of afford to wait and see how he does this season. But seems to me that Benito might be kind of a guy they're going to try to lock up this coming off season, because if it lingers and then he gets off to a hot start next year, I mean, his agent might just say, hey, we're waiting. We're going to let you get to free agency, and someone's going to give you 25 million a year or something, because how pass rushers get paid. So it'll be kind of interesting to see what transpires there. I mean, if Cooper's worth 15 million a year just based on sack numbers, and that's so much of what those type of contracts are based on, Benito's certainly going to get more than that.
Benito, Benito has some Von Miller vibes with how fast he is around that corner, and he seems to really jump the snap count well. So I think, yeah, the Broncos so he's eligible in the offseason, right, Chris? Like after this season, he can sign an extension.
He's eligible right after the season ends, because wasn't a first round pick and he's played 3 years. So again, it'll be interesting to see how that transpires. But one comparison to Cooper, I mean, Cooper is better against the run than Benito. I mean, Benito has the great sack numbers. He's getting better against the run, but still is taking steps in that area.
So I want to talk to both of you about this because our colleague Mark Kisley had a column about how, the Broncos were 6-5 last year. Kyle, you weren't on the beat, but Chris, you were. That they're not frauds this year. Kisley wrote this morning in the Denver Gazette. So I want to get both of your opinions on that. Chris, you were around that team last year when they went on that crazy winning streak with all the turnovers, got to 6-5. We're in the hunt part of the playoff picture when they would show it on TV. This feels completely different to me. How does it feel to you?
Yeah, it feels different. Just the standpoint that you've got the quarterback. I mean, even last year after the 5-game winning streak, people were thinking, okay, is Russell Wilson Sean Payton's quarterback for the future or not? And then I think there was some thinking that with that crazy stretch of getting all those takeaways, that 5-game winning streak maybe wasn't fully for real. But as I kind of touched upon in my NFL Insider on Sunday, expectations have now been raised with Bo Nix. So it's going to come down to how they finish. I mean, if somebody had said, let's say they go 9-8 and miss the playoffs or something like that, fans at the start of the season, probably a lot of them would have taken it. But Bo Nix, the way he's played and the way the defense has played, has raised expectations so much that this season is now going to be defined on how they finish. And if they don't make the playoffs, I mean, a lot of folks are going to be disappointed.
I want to get to Kyle's answer on that, but Chris, real quick, you mentioned Russell Wilson there. You had a great NFL insider about how it is possible that that's the 2-7 matchup in the AFC playoffs. Think Sean Payton would enjoy trying to take down Russell Wilson in the playoffs a little bit?
That would be interesting. 2 versus 7. I was talking to safety JL Skinner. He said, "Oh yeah, I would love to play Russell Wilson in the playoffs. That would be a great matchup." I mean, I think if the Broncos make the playoffs, which there's an excellent chance they will, they're going to be at number 7. It's
Yeah.
going to be really hard for them to catch the Chargers or the Ravens. So they're 7, and we'll just have to see who is 2. I mean, the Steelers are 2 games up on the loss column over the Ravens and have beaten them the first time. But Buffalo, they both have 2 losses, Pittsburgh and Buffalo. So the likelihood is one of those teams is going to be 2. So the strongest likelihood is that Denver's going to either Pittsburgh or Buffalo to open the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't think Denver wants anything to do with Baltimore again, so they should probably hope that Baltimore stays in that 5 seed. Yeah. All right, Kyle. So again, you weren't around this team last year like Chris was, but what do you see different? I mean, it's just a different feel.
Yeah, I mean, I was sort of thinking about this way this morning. The Broncos have emerged from the NFL basement, right? Forever they were languishing in just this mediocrity where people weren't going to go out of their way to watch them on TV if you weren't a fan. They weren't a real playoff contender. They didn't know who their quarterback is. They've turned the page, right? Like this is a team that is now a playoff contending team, whether that happens this year or next year. It's really on them and their current trajectory to make it happen. Because I do think that they've created separation from the worst teams in the NFL, and now they're trying to break into that next group of elite teams and be a squad that can really challenge Kansas City for supremacy in the division. And it's not going to be easy. You've got Justin Herbert and the Chargers playing so well, and they're another defensive led team. I think there's a lot of contenders in the AFC right now as a strong conference. But the Broncos have worked themselves back into that conversation. So I would agree, this team isn't a fraud. If they stay healthy, especially at all key positions, they should finish out in a great spot to be in contention. Just looking at the NFL's website right now, their probability is 67%, they're saying, to make the playoffs. And they're currently in as the 7th seed. So if you had told me that, back in training camp as we're heading into week 12, I don't know that I would have believed you. So that's a kudos to Sean Payton and this entire team for really kind of bucking some of those expectations. They already hit the over. So if our listeners put the over on 5.5, congratulations, your trust was rewarded.
And I think the good thing for the Broncos is they play Indy, they play Cincinnati, and they play the Chargers one more time. I'm interested on that Chargers game because we all know that when they would go play in San Diego or now LA, a lot of orange and blue in those stadiums. The Chargers are better than the Broncos this year so far. I wonder how the stadium's going to be with that. Real quick, Chris, the AFC West is probably looking at getting 3 teams in the playoffs.
Yeah, I would think so. It was kind of interesting. I was talking to one Broncos player the other day, and I said, "Who you rooting for in that Chargers Bengals
Yeah.
game?" And they didn't really know because they probably were rooting more for the Chargers to lose because players kind of think, more like, "Hey, we can catch them," and oh, we're not worried about Cincinnati; they're behind us. But the win by the Chargers helped the Broncos and it put a loss on the Bengals, but it hampered them in that the Chargers are still 2 games ahead of them in the loss column there. They do have a chance to get one of those back when they go to LA in about a month here. But yeah, the AFC, with the exception of the Raiders, I mean, who knows what the heck's going on there? But we've been saying that for a lot of years. The exception of the Raiders, that is a darn good division. And everybody was touting the NFC North as the best division in football. Not saying the AFC West is the best, but they're certainly making a run at being able to trumpet themselves in that manner.
It is Raiders week. That doesn't really matter anymore. I heard that shocking stat. The Broncos have not swept the Raiders in 10 years. So they have a chance to do that this week. Broncos early favorite. I think I saw 2.5, 3.5. That makes sense. The Raiders are a mess. But we will preview that later in the week. So Guys, thanks for coming on. Make sure to check out all these guys' coverage over at denvergazette.com. They are getting ready to go listen to Sean Payton talk here in a couple minutes, so we'll have an update from that on our website. Subscribe to this podcast on Apple or on Spotify. And guys, we'll catch up later in the week to preview the Broncos Raiders matchup in Vegas. Thanks again.